Thanks.
Yes, what do you mean?
I just started the recording. That's it.
Okay. And so there are several factors that make that safety culture could be a very interesting resource to set rolling stewardship of radioactive waste management. However, as we will see, there are today different aspects that need to be refined or adapted to this very specific context. And we will discuss, and just to introduce also the presentation of Marina after on extended safety culture. This is one of the challenge that has been dealt with a bit of research in the past years that she will introduce after me. Okay. So, it seems I cannot move anymore. No, yes, I see now. Okay. So my presentation includes three parts, in fact. First, I will give you a sort of historical presentation of the safety culture concept, which appeared just after Chernobyl. And then I will also bring some insights on the Luhmann's theory of social systems, which gives an idea of how safety culture can interact and brings a specific dimension of safety. And then I will conclude with the key challenges for safety culture in the context of long-term stewardship of radioactive waste management. So to start with safety culture, it's important to have in mind that the safety culture concept was elaborated after Chernobyl, and it was a kind of a very first reflection of the need not only to rely on model for safety management, but also in a way to deal with complexity of phenomenon. And in particular, the idea that the procedures, because in the nuclear world, operators are not always, many of them are technicians, they are not scientists, and they, in the day-to-day of the management of NPPs, they apply procedures. But the problem is that it came up that procedures were not enough to have a sort of in-depth understanding of what was running into the management of nuclear energy. So this document was issued in '86, and it was prepared by some chief inspector of nuclear safety. And the first definition that was provided is the following. Safety culture is that assembly of characteristics and attitudes in organizations and individuals, which establishes that as an overriding priority, nuclear plant safety issues received the attention warranted by their significance. This is a very important statement because it gives to people, to person, a very important role, not as operator of procedure, but by their own capacity to, let's say, grasp the complexity of phenomenon. In parallel to the implementation of safety culture, to the definition of safety culture, for the first time, a new function appeared in the nuclear plants, the so-called safety inspectors. And the safety inspectors were engineers with a scientific background. And their role was to not at all connected with the operational safety. They were, in a way, in charge of listening unexpected noises. It's not only noises, but unexpected facts, unexpected elements that may change the understanding of what was at stake in the running of the NPP. So I will come back to what means this definition has been developed and also turned into a kind of obligation for nuclear operators and all the actors involved in this area. But it's important to note that it was not foreseen to include civil society. It addresses only the first cycle of nuclear actors, the government, the regulators, the operators, the researchers, the designers at institutional and individual level. It's very important to note that it's not only a kind of obligation for institution, but it also involves the ethical level. So this picture is coming from the INSAG 4 publication of the EAEA. The picture in the middle shows how the concept has been developed. It involves, as you see, the government, the regulators, the operators, the researchers, the designers. But obviously, if you can see that it's not only a question of management, it's also a policy level definition, which involves statement of safety policy, management structures at government level, resources, self-regulation, and also down on the right, you can see the level of individual commitments with questioning attitude, rigorous and prudent approaches, communication, and safety culture. So obviously, this concept is not only a technical concept. It involves legal, technical, financial, organizational, and individual and ethical and social aspect. So it's very interesting because it is in '86. Now, in the area of radioactive waste management, by many aspects, we are struggling to, let's say, acknowledge the importance of this socio-technical nature of radioactive waste management. But already at that time, there was a sort of understanding, at least the beginning of it, of the very nature of what is at stake with safety. And for the first time, in INSAG 4 includes this idea of independence of regulators. You can read the quote here: the management style of a regulatory agency ensures that common concern for safety leads to relations with operating organizations that are open and cooperative, and yet have the formality and the separateness appropriate for bodies with recognizably different accountabilities. It is worth to note because this aspect today is strongly, let's say, recognized. It's not always implemented because there are countries where it's unclear those principles of independence are implemented. But at least this is the doctrine, in fact, of nuclear safety. There is also this idea of creating a context of openness to discuss, in fact, the setting of the safety objective, and also to make sure that the operators are not, let's say, in the logic of just applying standards, but also are ready to discuss in depth what it means what is intended by the regulator and how they could approve it and they could implement it. So I quote here again this document. This document underlined the need of response of all those who strive for excellence in matters affecting nuclear safety, that is characterized by a questioning attitude, plus a rigorous and prudent approach, plus communication. And this would result as a major contribution to safety. This is at least the credo of INSAC 4. But you will see when, and here I bring the question which are included, because in each of the categories of actors, for each of categories of actors that are concerned by nuclear safety, there is a list of questions that those personnel should apply to their own situation. So I will just read them to give you an idea. I see them as strongly demanding, in fact. So, for instance, can staff members clearly enunciate their own responsibilities? Can personnel state ways in which safety might be prejudiced by their own erroneous action and by those of others working in related areas? What step would staff members take if they observed action that might reduce safety margin? What attitude do individuals take towards their own mistakes that might prejudice safety? What would an operator or a member of the maintenance staff do if, in following a written procedure, he came upon a step that he thought was a mistake? Do staff stop and think when facing an unforeseen situation? So this was for individuals, it's general statement. And then this questioning goes to every categories of actors. I will not review all the categories of actors, but you can clearly have a look to this document, which is accessible on internet, INSAC 4 document, and then the list of questions are there. But I just wanted to also include the questions regarding the researchers. So here, again, I quote, do researchers ensure that they understand how the result of their work will be used in safety analysis? Are they familiar with how their data are used in interpolating or extrapolating for ranges of parameters different from those in their experiments? This is very interesting because, for instance, today NTW is involved into a large research program called URAD as observer, according to the perspective of the Earth Convention, and we can see that many of the researchers are in a way focused on their task, and they do not take a longer perspective. They are in their silo, they work, they are efficient, but they do their research, but it's unclear that they really have the final use in mind when they develop their research. And I will continue the quoting of the questions. Do researchers identify the shortcomings and limitations of their result? Do they keep abreast of safety analysis to permit them to identify any misuse of their work? Do they report any potential misuse or misinterpretation? On any particular topic, it is clear which group, or is it clear, sorry, which group or individuals is responsible for monitoring new material or international data? What personal contacts have been developed to keep abreast of new data? Is there a mechanism for reporting new information that may invalidate previous safety analysis? What is the appeal route if the first level of notification is ineffective? How often are these mechanisms used? And you see here the problem of a whistleblower. means it's not only an individual question, it's also the capacity of an individual to raise attention on a particular point of safety, which might damage his career or his position in one organization. We see that many times. Is there a mechanism for ensuring that the relevant research to solve design and operational safety problems is pursued and carried out in a timely fashion? How promptly are the results of research fed into the design and regulatory process? Is there a policy for regular publication of research results in journals that insist on referring by peers? So, in a way, this was some. I wanted to give you a clue on this safety culture concept. Of course, there are discussions on the extent to which the safety culture concept is effectively implemented. And I would see myself, but maybe some may have a different opinion, but that at institutional level, it might be that many elements has been implemented, but the question is the capacity of individuals to also contribute and also to raise a level of awareness which makes them effectively implement this idea of safety culture. And now to bring maybe a kind of context in, or let's say a sort of understanding of how it comes into play, I thought maybe interesting to bring element of the Luhmann's theory on social science, social systems, sorry, the idea that in fact for all systems existing in the world is too complex. There are much more possibilities than what a system can cope with while maintaining itself. This is a quote from Niklas Luhmann. So he says, a system is positioning itself in front of an environment that is constituted in a selective manner. This environment breaks itself when confronted with contradiction that occurs between it and the world. So it is through a social response, not just individuals, that are built structural problems and modes of collective actions that can take advantage of this complexity. Now, Luhmann insists on the importance of trust as a mechanism for addressing complexity. So the perspective here is not the question of should an actor trust another. It's a global perspective on the way trust with other mechanisms such as law, organization, market, authority, democratic representation are the structures that enable complexity reduction and the coordination of collective action. So as Luhmann says, where there is trust, there are more opportunities for experience and action. The complexity of the social system increases, and therefore the number of possibilities that its structure can reconcile, as trust is a more effective form of reducing complexity. But of course, the world complexity is not static; it is always changing. And in this perspective, the representation of the system representation of its environment becomes fragile or vulnerable as soon as this system, the whole context is evolving. So there is a need of a dynamic management, which involves complexity reduction, but then also rupture and crisis. And I wanted to mention here the idea of emancipatory catastrophe from Ulrich Beck, which opened the way to new forms of understanding and coping with complexity. And as Luhmann says, advanced societies are those that are able to deal with complex phenomena. Having said that, Luhmann underlines the system's inherent obsolescence in fact, what is behind this idea that the more the system becomes efficient, the more it becomes vulnerable. Why is it? According to Luhmann's model, social system breaks into differentiated in silo subsystem that allows a tremendous increase in societal complexity. However, subsystem differentiation remains a potential threat to survival of subsystem and the system as a whole. Systems develop obsolescence as a counterpart of their efficiency. Because, in fact, the more the system breaks into sub-parties, the less those sub-parties are, let's say, trapped into their silo, the less they can dialogue, they can, let's say, reorganize their global vision of the world. So it is very conservatist, in fact, and it tends to, let's say, create risk, in fact. So Luhmann considers subsystem differentiation as something more fundamental and difficult to overcome, a precondition for effective subsystem operation, but a potential threat to survival of subsystem and the system as a whole. A number of commentators consider Luhmann's pessimism regarding technological governance not as a form of fatalism, but as a useful diagnostic resource. This is where comes the idea of transboundary interaction to overcome functional simplification. Luhmann argues that functional simplification is also an essential principle of modern technology, which isolate and manipulate specific causal processes, but notes that it is possible only if interference by external actors is to a large extent excluded. And this is where lies the risk, in fact. These simplifications involve paradoxical trade-off. Containment of the system has to be mitigated with the need for integrating wider world information. Thus, in society as a whole, in social subsystem and in modern technologies, managing a complexity sustainability trade-off is crucial. So out of this, William Kinsella from North Carolina State University issued some recommendation for policy and practice. So he states that more fully that phenomena, including seismic and weather events, losses of supporting infrastructures, human errors, management failures, and security breaches are not external hazards, but intrinsic to nuclear power as an environmentally embedded socio-technical system. Another recommendation is to expand the nuclear power conversation by cultivating greater participation by non-specialists. Another recommendation is about other possibilities, including experimenting with novel public venues, expanding long-term engagement through advisory bodies, and incorporating affected communities more fully into the design of public consultation. Rather than being directed toward public acceptance, efforts can be oriented toward inclusive dialogue steered equally by all parties. The technocratic barriers to such participation are formidable and well documented. So this recommendation is intended to provoke further reflection on possible fundamental changes. So complement with the prevailing emphasis on quantitative safety metrics and related assumptions regarding the completeness and accuracy of quantitative risk models with broader qualitative appraisal of safety as understood by a broader range of parties. Although safety and economic concerns are often separated rhetorically, they are in fact deeply intertwined. So here you have a set of recommendations which aims at creating those transboundary interaction that includes the larger public, in fact, and not only the operators or let's say the institutional actors of nuclear safety. So here as a conclusion, I will just let's say, bring some element that radioactive waste management is about making decisions on the very long term in an uncertain environment with a plurality of stakeholders. Safety cultures could contribute to sustain trustworthy interactions among concerned categories of actors in the context of radioactive waste management. But safety culture needs to be put into practice. As I early explained, there are questions on the capacity today of safety culture as it is understood by institutions to reach the level of individuals. But there is also another level that need to be reached, which is civil society as a genuine actor of radioactive waste management in the perspective of the Aarhus Convention. But also, when we consider the radioactive waste management, we have a real challenge, which is about, let's say, the very long-term intergenerational management process and the question of transmission. So more or less, here we have some challenges, but which are, let's say, on the table and something that we could work out as a perspective to provide some resources for rolling stewardship and allow a kind of not only, let's say, among a plurality of stakeholders on the long term. I think I have finished now.
Before I start the presentation, I will very shortly present myself. So my name is Marina. I'm working for the Belgian Regulatory Authority, which is a federal agency for nuclear control. I'm working in the group for radioactive waste management. We are with about like 10 people, and I'm mostly, for my tasks are mostly focused on intermediate high-level waste and operational safety. And today I was asked to give a presentation on the regulatory perspective on the role in stewardship and the radioactive waste management concept. And actually, I was kind of thinking, how can I give it to you in a fun way? So I kind of chose also a few practical examples. And I wanted also to talk about a little bit the personality of the regulator and its characteristics. So I think you all know the cartoon about like Inside Out, about the emotions that people have and the profiles of these people. So I kind of invite you to take a mask, a body of the regulator, to enter it. And before, let's put it like this, we start the game. I will kind of outline you the presentation, so that will be your charm to have, so you can see a little bit the logic behind my presentation, so you can build your own vision of how your own vision on the perspective that I'm going to present today. And also just to underline again, as you probably agree, everyone has its own perspective. So everything that I present today is a little bit influenced by my own vision. So it's not really representative, but I really tried to make it as clear as possible and as simple as possible. So I will actually first talk a little bit about key principles of effective regulators. So we really try to be as effective as possible, as useful as possible. So I will give you a few examples of these principles that we try to have in the organization and build it up, which is actually also one of the base stones for, let's say, safety culture, to have it at place and to make role in stewardship work. And then every regulator and actually every person in everyday life, we encounter, I would not call it problems, we can call it challenges or questions that we need to answer. So to have a problem solved, a question answer, we always need to have elements for that. So I will give you a little bit the insight of these elements. Why do we need it? You will see it also in the example of the practical examples. So I will give you a little bit an insight on the regulatory profile, let's say, if you're sitting in my head. Then we will just set up a little bit like a common ground, what role in stewardship for me is and what safety culture is. Then a very short review of the regulatory tasks. So then you can actually dig into the practical examples that we have on the floor every day as a, let's say, as a regulator. So the list that you see right in front of you is a little bit an utopia, of course. We would really wish that every characteristic that you see here is applied, is present. And let's say, I've learned recently from the actually yoga course that the intention is more than actually performance at the end. So if you have the intention, you have the process, you will get the result. So we really value independence as an expertise. So then actually when we interact with civil society, that is a very important point, that your vision is independent and you're not influenced by any external reason. That regulators need to be accountable for their actions. I would say that transparency is very, very, very important, and the process has to be fair and impartial and open and kind of like extensive and meaningful. So the opportunity is given to the public participation. What I mean on the predictability is that the system of the regulation should be reasonable, and in my opinion, certainly as to the principle and rules, laws that will be followed within the regulatory framework. Proportionality. Often, I would not say we forget that, but regulatory intervention should be proportional to the challenges. So when we talk also about the power, let's not abuse the power that we have as a regulator. Integrity has to be maintained. So those are the few key principles that are very important for the regulator to be effective. Then when we come, let's say we have this set of principles that we would like to maintain, and then we of course we have a problem or a challenge that we need to solve. And imagine you have a team with all the key principles that we just saw before, and we try to solve a problem with a logical approach. You need to stay objective. You have to be coherent, consistent, and you have to basically think and adjust, optimize each time. For now, I believe that this elements that I'm given are a little bit vague, but when you see the context of the practical examples, let's not forget them and try to apply them, because in a few minutes I will propose you a game as well, how to solve a problem together. So then we can also have a direct interaction with you, so we can solve a case together, just to see how it feels and what would be your insight on that. I also wanted to talk about a little bit about personalities. It's applicable for every human and not only the regulator, but sometimes my personal experience that somehow we are seen not as humans, but more as people that come and punish and are very boring and are very administrative. But I have to say, we have a heart, we have emotions. You can meet different profiles in the organization, and which actually helps, if we come back to role in stewardship and safety culture, it helps to develop and see other dimensions. So it was just like one little slide to show you that don't forget the human aspect, the personality aspect behind every role that we take, every action that we take. And that's why actually the interactions with civil society, that's why we needed interactions with different involved parties. We all needed to be able to extend this, or maybe to simplify the complexity of the system. Then when we know the reason, we have at least an intention and a way to solve the problem further. So to get a little bit on the common ground, I basically, as a partially blue profile, I digged into the definition of this role in stewardship. And I saw two beautiful lines that are very important, let's say, on my opinion, is that when we talk about role in as a word, it's, for me, it's very important that it's continuous, it is adjustable. So that's are the key characteristics for me, and it's flexible for circumstances. And when we talk about stewardship, that is a careful and responsible management. So these two lines were actually a little bit, let's put it, a key for my car to start to drive towards the practical examples where I can show how the role in stewardship is applied at the regulatory side. And this slide, I was just wanted to synthesize as well a little bit more on what we understand under a role in stewardship, that I believe it would, personally, I believe it would empower each generation if it is chosen for. And we always have an understanding of the factors, uncertainties, or like of factors that are difficult to assess, or in other words, imponderables. So if we keep this rationale behind the approach of role in stewardship, it gets easier to accept it as well at the end and to apply. I was a little bit hoping that Gilles would show this picture on the left, the one that was developed in the framework of Cytex 2 project. And I was actually super happy to see that Robert and Gordon were here today, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to take your article and take, let's say, a reference from each article, a citate from each article, an element from role in stewardship principle, and show how it is applied from the regulatory side. So, and for me, what I also wanted to tell you, of course, when I wake up, I go to work, I don't really think each time, oh, I'm applying safety culture here, or I'm applying role in stewardship here. But what I feel is that both concepts, they're feeding each other and developing each other further, and they both need each other. So these are kind of two elements that need to be together, and the understanding of them need to be also promoted further. Also, what we see often about safety culture is now it's kind of coming also in as a strong way, at least within our group for our everyday tasks, a little bit even the understanding of safety culture, but also the maturity of the application of safety culture. And that's also quite important. The childhood of the safety culture was, let's put it in 86. I was born in 87, so hopefully I belong to the happy generation of improved safety culture. So here we immediately enter a few practical examples. So I will give you an example of the current regulation. So it will be a little bit a part of a text from the actual law in Belgium, where I see the role in stewardship principle. And then I will talk about the participation of the regulator in different research projects, the examples, and how then the role in stewardship is kind of reflected there. And then I will give you a few examples of the operational safety cases. So again, I already mentioned before, so I kind of shamelessly took the the reference of the article of Gordon and Robert. And on this other side, I put a list of the everyday tasks of the regulator. So we prepare law, we follow up on the technical evolution of the new regulations, but also on the international project to maintain the independence. We implement the regulations, we ensure their compliance with the regulations. There are other tasks like participation in the inspections every day. We all follow up scientific research, we give advices, and also recently, in view of the developments on the floor towards deep disposal, I would say. The regulator, the FANC side from Belgium, they're more and more interested, and we try to participate as much as possible, to interact as much as possible on the floor with the civil society. The first project that I had at FANC when I just started working there was actually Cytex2 network. So I was immediately working on the social, socio-technical side of the regulator. So I would say that in this presentation further, I take a citate from the article. I look how the task of a regulator is reflected there, and then the example of the role in stewardship. So first, one of the references that I took, it was about the retrieval. So retrieval is anticipated and actually planned for. So I looked at our regulations, laws, and actually what I found an article that gives a definition of the disposal, where actually it's clearly written that we need to have an open option for the retrieval of waste. Presently, for now, there are no requirements for retrieval or in Belgium law. However, if you look at the regulation itself, at the law itself, there is, let's say, an opening for it. The option exists. So we don't exclude the option of retrieval. Then I looked further into our own, let's say, database on the concepts that as a regulator we have to also develop some guidelines, internal, external, international, national. And I have found a very interesting concept article, a document which gives a little bit different approach and vision on the reversibility and retrievability. And what I'm going to maybe let you read is actually the reflection of civil society on that document that was developed by the regulatory body, by FANC. It was actually developed in 2010. It seems to be a long time ago, but I believe the speed is rather slow, but I'm very happy that we've got some reflections of the civil society on that note, which actually shows that the concept that FANC proposes on reversibility has a technical and social part. And that is quite, I would still put it unique. It's not that I want to give a compliment all the time to us, but it's very useful in the context of what we are actually trying to change today. So there is a social part to the concept that seems technical at its vicinity. Then also as one of the tasks, we developed a strategic research agenda or strategic research needs document, where we also independently trying to look at the reversibility and retrievability option. And the document for now is not public yet, so but I hope, fingers crossed, that at some point this document might be public. And what is also very helpful is that every deliverable of the strategic research agenda will help the regulator to stay independent, but also to review the upcoming safety case. So in a way, again, the role in stewardship, the transmission of the information towards future generation, the transparency, or let's put it like this, not yet transparency of the document, but let's hope for the future that it is applied. If we talk about development of the expertise, independent expertise, persistence of memory, transmission of the information here, and I was also happy to see Bernd here. I wanted to say a few words on the Monterey project, where regulators can take part. And actually, we have a unique opportunity at FANC that we guide one of the experiments, which is called DRC. And this experiment, and now I will be a little bit scientific, it is on diffusion and a thermal gradient. But what is actually very, again, unique here, that we have a consortium of different parties, involved parties. We have the expertise, it's well documented. It's you have interactions with all the parties. The expertise is for the future. It's developed constantly, which I find also one of the elements of healthy, let's put it like, application of role in stewardship. And here I just gave a few photos because actually 2 weeks ago I was personally on site, and with my own eyes I've seen how the borehole was drilled, how much work it was, that the tourists were coming through. There are open days for Monterey project. You can go, you can visit, you can talk to the experts. It's a very, very nice example of how the society can be involved in also in such a technical aspect of the work. When we talk about continuous monitoring and corrective actions, so here I would just ask you maybe 4 minutes of your time to unmute your micros. And why do I need a team for? So imagine one of the other tasks of the regulator is to perform inspections on the installation. And for this case study, we have an inspection of radioactive waste. The type of waste that we have to look at, it's very, very short-lived. Well, let's put it medical waste, maximum 3 months time decay. And on the site, when you're on the site itself, I will show you the pictures in a second. What you define, what you find, in French, it will be like infraction. So it's kind of not in regulation with the law. That you see the accumulation of the waste on site, you see that the housekeeping, so it's not a clean site, it has to be improved. You have a plastic bag that is ruptured. So those are the findings that you can see on the spot. And let's put it, so this is a picture that you get. So on the left side, it's let's say you go first time on inspection, you give your findings and you ask to improve the situation. And next time you come for inspection, you see the same accumulation of waste. However, there is a small change. There is a sort of net put right at the bottom to improve the situation. So what I want to ask you is like, what would be, let's not your solution, but what would be your behavior as a regulator when you see such a situation? And what would be your communication? What measures would you like to ask from the exploitant, let's put them like that, from the person or the company that you are inspecting? Because in a way, safety culture and even role in stewardship, they're not only, in my opinion, for the long term, they're also for short terms. So when you have a situation like this, you see that, okay, we talk about very, very short-lived waste. You might accept that the risks are very low for contamination. However, the culture needs to be also in this small detail that even though the risks are very low, to my opinion, it has to be managed properly. So maybe if you can give me just 2-3 keywords on what would be your solution to this kind of problem. Imagine you have a situation, you come, there's accumulation of waste, you come a second time, and it's almost the same, but with a slight difference. So what would you as a regulator communicate to the installation? Or what would be your measures? How, or you can propose the solution for the problem. Just 2-3 words. We have, let's say, 4 minutes, and then I go. I will not bother you too much. So, is there something that we can improve on this accumulation of waste? Yeah, just speak up, and then we just speak up for 3 minutes.
Niels?
I think it depends upon the nature of the waste. Like the different radionuclides have different pathways.
Yeah.
Some can be transmitted through the air, through the water.
Yeah.
Some are more impermeable. So
Yeah.
it's hard to give an answer based upon just not knowing what the materials are.
Yeah. So I will give you immediately. It's the how do you call them? The gloves. So it's organic waste. It's very short-lived. You don't, after 72 hours, let's put it at floor at 18, it's not anymore contaminated, but still it's waste for 78 hours. And you have such a accumulation, such a loss of understanding of the proper environment.
Well, I would assume that this represents some sort of non-compliance with the accepted safety measures. So I have three keywords: warning, disciplinary measures, and education.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have, for example, a bag that is totally, because so you have a bag that is totally ruptured, what would be your conclusion on the attitude of the exploitant?
Careless.
Well, yeah, careless.
Okay. What would be your measure to change the situation? Because you can, you're a regulator, you can operate, but the only tool you have is the law.
Well, containment has to be more than adequate.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
But if it's inadequate, rebag it.
Exactly. So, and if you think of the role in stewardship and safety culture, what would be your advice? Let's put like this, that we are still very kind. We do not come back with a fine of €1,000 a day unless the situation is changed. So what would be your maybe, because we have to keep the compassion of nature. So what would be?
Yeah, a comment. I would say that it's not only the nature of the waste or the containment, but also it depends of the circumstances of
Right.
the failure. I think if it is just punctual, or it could be a sort of a signal that all the organization is going wrong. So we need more to understand what is the organizational commitment to manage this issue. And this is, in my view, where safety culture comes into play.
And the complexity.
The attitude, but the personal attitude, but also the institutional organization.
But
maybe, sorry, I stop this.
No, but this is also where economics and safety may come into conflict.
Exactly, because I can give you an example that if they have a lack of human resources, the waste will be accumulated. The lack of human resources means that there are no financial coming. Why there's no financial? Because probably the management is not.
Sure.
Exactly.
I don't know. They could simply have a special room for decades. It means like in a hospital. So that's this type of very short-lived waste. You would put in a special room and close the door, and you wait the time necessary, and then you open it, and all is non-radioactive.
Yes, but we still have security issues on flammability, for example, on that.
That's another question.
Yeah.
But just the radioactivity question is to be solved by a room which is not accessible to everybody. And somewhere it can decay, and then the additional problems related to which are non-radioactive.
But imagine that this room, they have only one room, and that the circuit of the production of waste is non-stop. So it means they cannot.
That's like in a hospital. So that means you have, for example, technetium-99 has a half-life of less than a day. So you need about a week for decay. So you would put the waste in one room. And then you may need a second room for when the first room is clean again. Then you take the second.
Could I point out, however, that less than half a day only refers to the gamma radiation. The beta radiation has a half-life of 210,000 years from technetium-99.
Yes, but that's in regulatory. That's no issue because the quantity is very low.
And,
you're assuming.
Yeah.
No, I'm knowing this.
And they used the
Yes, you
technique
can
99M. So, but it's just, I just wanted you to interact a little bit to see. So I will tell you in a way how, well, let's say because it was my inspection and how I handled it. It's still an ongoing process, but we indeed, like Bernd proposed, there is a room, you have to have enough space. So you need to communicate the volumes of the waste production so you can actually preview how much you have. So then the waste is decayed. You have to be very carefully how you store the waste. So if you, like Robert said as well, if you have a bag that is ruptured, you need to overpack it. You have, also Neil said, education, constant education of the operators. So was also the message. The message is also take care of their human resources. So this is in a way also, this all builds up the culture that was there already in place, but sometimes you come and you point out, and there's not only the technical part, but also a personality part. Sometimes ego kicks in and people do not want to work together. So it's all very complex, and people, like Jill was saying, people are working in silos. It's also true for the operational safety and little tasks like that, 2 hours, but it's still in silo, and we don't see sometimes the application of culture. Okay, I go further. Continuous monitoring of waste. So I wanted to add a little bit of a drama and talk about long-term safety problems with one of the types of waste that was called Eurobitumen or bitumen waste. And I was happy that Christophe was there as well, and Valérie. So they can, if you have questions that are a little bit more technical, they can answer that. But it is just also the example for me, also if we talk about role in stewardship, because there are inspections that are performed by a waste management organization. We have a technical support dossier that comes and also helps with the inspections on site. But during these inspections are very important to have them regularly, so the problems like corroded drums are really identified on time. Because if we talk about bitumen waste as a waste, it is for now for the geological disposal. So it's not going to be solved in a day. But here it's just an example of a totally corroded drum with the bitumen waste coming on the top of the drum, and you cannot enter the bunker. It radiates really actively, really high. For now, the plans of the exploitant is to build another building and then move this waste there. But again, this problem cannot be solved now. It is for the future, but there is a monitoring, there is an inspection program. There are solutions trying to be looked for again within the. There was a project under European Commission on the reprocessing of some sort of waste, reconditioning of some sort of waste. So this is one of the examples of the long-term problem. Also, a very famous example of the alkali silica reaction gel. So a little bit like a jelly. So it's not like somebody was eating confiture on this drum. It's literally a reaction after a certain amount of years, I think more than 30, that the gel-like material was found on the outer surface of the package of the drum. Also, due to inspections and monitoring. So now ONDRAV has developed R&D program. They're constantly monitoring. They're making progress on that. But again, it's more a collaborative work because the problem is not solved yet. How it's going to be disposed further in the future. And the very important part is, and for bitumen and for ISR, there is a campaign on recharacterization of waste. So then for future generation, there is a database on the inventory of the waste.
Is that gel radioactive or not?
I don't think so. I think the chemical, it was not highly radioactive.
But was lowly radioactive?
Yeah, if you want me, I will check, because this is, since it's low level waste, it is another colleague of mine that is looking at it. But if you like, I will really looked at the level of radiation of this DEL, but I think it was, I'm trying to read very fast. I will come back to this question to be absolutely sure that I give you the correct information.
Okay.
So this is a very beautiful picture of the, of the drums. Also, I wanted to say, this comes also from the site of the Waste Management Organization, and also shows that they are trying to be transparent on that issue. And their plan to tackle this problem is also available. So, which I find positive. Okay, interactions with civil society. I wanted to, I didn't know whether you will be like very active or not. So to make you a little bit like smile, I found this picture because I have to say, as a very blue profile, I find this is my emotions when I interact with civil society. When we first time came to MIU and then to Budapest with the CITEX network organization. And that was a little bit how it felt when you started to, you pose a question, you get an answer, and it totally doesn't fit anymore in your formula that you have learned in university, I would say. However, with time and with working on different projects, you start to feel like this. You are still kind of working on it, but it just like to wake you up a little bit and make you smile. I'm not sure every regulator feels like this after some results on interaction with civil society made, but I do feel it most often. So what kind of projects did we already participate in as a regulator? So it was CITEX, CITEX 1, CITEX 2, then the CITEX network was born, then the beautiful PEP game was born. And here actually I have good news. Very soon in October, this game will be played again with the young people. And this game will be organized actually by the Waste Management Organization. We participate in different international projects with work packages on interaction with civil society. We try to get into end users group like Human, for example. That was also a very interesting discussion last week. And also at FANC, we have our internal communication plan that we are trying to now get approved. So then when the safety case and when the debate starts on the new regulation towards disposal, that we could also participate as much as possible. So here's some pictures. You can see Nadia there, Julien, my younger version. So that's been already actually almost 7 years. Huh? Okay.
What does CITEX stand for? CITEX?
Sustainable Network for Expertise, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Something like that. Yeah, that was, and actually, maybe if Gilles talks about it later on, but everyone is very much welcome if a part of civil society, because we are looking for always for active participation. That's what we talk. As a conclusion, I will not really give you any conclusion because the work is ongoing, and the conclusion could be only for now, the feedback that I could get from you, and maybe some intentions that you would like to see from the side of the regulator, or just some ideas, or what would you like to see more in the future? Because today we just have 40 minutes, but if I dig into the everyday work of the regulator, we can talk about optimization principle, defense in depth, how it is reflected in the role and stewardship. We can come up with more practical examples, more photos. So the conclusion is more, I'm very happy that it's happening, that there is a connection, and that people are eager and are active. And that's what makes everything for me drive at least forward, not stop.